Hey guys, what's up? Tom Fountainhead back here once again for my channel Fountainhead TV, and I have a new series that I'm starting today, and so this is kind of a test balloon going up in the air, in the YouTube air, and let's see what you guys think of it. So in a nutshell, I love talking about music. I love talking in general, but I love talking about music the most by far. And I love talking to my friends about music. I love talking to my students about music and discussing music, dissecting music, sharing opinions. I think that's one of the greatest things in life. And unfortunately, if you're a self-employed musician like I am, on social media, most of the time you're kind of building your brand and you're busy promoting your own stuff, right? And you don't necessarily really share the music that you like and that you are discovering with your audience so much. I know some people do that, but I found that it doesn't really work for me because I have so much other things to share and to promote. And unfortunately, I can't do both on a platform like Facebook, for example. So I thought I would indulge myself and you guys hopefully too by doing this on YouTube instead. I want to be focusing on music that I already know and like, and I know that I can share some things with you in talking about this music that will hopefully be educational and that may shed some light about some of the inner workings of music that maybe you weren't aware of previously. So that is the aim. But that being said, if you have something that you want me to react to and give my musical opinion on, leave it in the comments below, and maybe I will be doing an episode soon about music that I'm hearing for the first time. So, but for now, for this episode, I want to share with you an album and a song by a band called Wilderun. And this is something that my friend James turned me on to a couple of weeks ago, and they conveniently had a new album coming out, so I pre-ordered it. And you can do too, before I forget. So it's Wilderun, that's the name of the band, .bandcamp.com. So there you can directly order the album. It's called Veil of Imagination, and it's fucking phenomenal. So just in a nutshell, I think Wilderun are labeled as folk metal by most people, which is such a, I don't know, misleading genre tag. I mean, genres are for fucking pussies anyway. But so just saying that if you want to label this correctly, I'd say label it as if Blackwater Park Opeth had a baby with Back to Times of Splendor era Disillusion, and then have Swedish death metal legend Dan Sveno handle the vocals, right? So this is that was my very first impression of this album. So everybody knows and is familiar with Opeth, I assume, but Disillusion is this like semi-legendary German band, prog metal band, which also mixed. They had long songs, they had very epic compositions, they had clean vocals, growl vocals, they had electronic effects, they had orchestration, and they also had the same thing going that Wilderun have going on this album, which is that they have these very epic dynamics over the course of the album. So this is definitely an album band. I'd say that the song, what is it called? Far From Where Dreams Unfurl, which was the first single that I also heard, my introduction to the band as well. I think this is a good starting point, and it's the most obvious choice for a single, even though it's 8.5 minutes long. But you really have to give this album the proper time and attention and space. You have to listen to it as an album, because it makes the most sense listen to from start to finish, because the songs are puzzle pieces in a greater progression that's just beautiful to go on. And this is something that Disillusion also did very well on that album. I don't know, like 20 years ago already. Jesus Christ, I'm old. Anyway, so these are like the reference points. And there's also a very nice tribute to Blackwater Park era Opeth in the song, The Tyranny of Imagination. At least I think that it's a kind of a tribute, because the song has some musical references to the title song of that Opeth album, and also ends with the same very characteristic production effect. I'm not going to spoil it any more than that, but so I think there are definitely nods to Opeth, and especially in the vocals, because the lead singer of Wilderun has a voice that is roughly similar in terms of range and expression to Mikael Åkerfeldt's, and he also has the clean vocals growl thing going on, and he does a phenomenal job at both. The vocals, the growl vocals are very meaty, very evil, and clean vocals are very beautiful, very ethereal, and I think his voice, to me, though, sounds more like Dan Swanos. So Dan Swanos, a Swedish death metal legend who founded tons of different projects, but most notably Edge of Sanity, which are absolutely legendary. If you don't know Crimson 1 and Crimson 2, these two one-song death metal compositions, you absolutely need to go back and do your homework, because that shit influenced so many bands. And I think Wilderun are absolutely, without a doubt, among those. And obviously also they are in cooperation with Dan here, because he's mixed and mastered this album very competently. But honestly, the first time I heard this album, I thought it was Dan singing, because his voice sounds very similar to the clean vocals that Wilderun singer does here. So now getting into the music itself, I think it's very interesting to talk about not only what they do, but also, and this is where we can find some meaningful lessons here, I hope, also talking about what they don't do that maybe other bands do, which is super important to how this album is constructed. So if we stay with the vocals for a moment, what's really interesting is that it kind of goes against the grain of a lot of metal vocal productions these days, because you don't have a lot of layering. You don't have low, mid, high layers, and then background vocals and choir and all of this stuff. You don't have that. If he's singing clean, there's like one clean vocal, and I think most of the time it's not even doubled. If he sings the low growl things, there's his low growls, and there's not like 3 different harsh screams on top of each other. And this is a super good decision that they made. Maybe they even recorded way more vocals and then decided to leave them out. I don't know, but whatever the reasoning behind it was, it works terrifically well, because the music is already full of information. And on the other hand, a lot of times I feel, especially with modern metal bands, that this whole layering thing is kind of like an excuse to have, I won't say shitty ideas, but like half-baked ideas. So everything sounds better if you double it, right? And if you have a not that great vocal line, put a bunch of layers on top of it and just make it more interesting. I mean, I have been doing that tons of times in my productions. And but if you have the perfect vocal line and the perfect notes in the harmony, and if your vocal patterns are just rhythmically, on point with the music, you don't need that. And obviously if you have a good singer. And I think Wilderun on this album have tremendously well written and orchestrated vocal lines, and whenever he sings, it's a highlight, right? And this is something that you can't say for all metal albums out there. So they don't overstuff their vocals, and that is also being carried onto the arrangement itself. So that may sound paradoxical, because if you listen to it, it just hits you over the head with 300 tracks of orchestration. But if you really get into this in this album, you discover that all the elements are really thought out and really fine-tuned to perfection. Which isn't to say that Dan Sverno probably had a very intense time mixing and mastering this album, because there's so much going on. But even though there is so much going on, everything has its place. And if you listen to... I don't want to be dissing anybody here. This is, about positivity. But just for a moment, if we think of a band like Flash God Apocalypse, right? I'm not saying I don't like them or I do like them. I'm just taking them as an example. So a lot of times they will be playing at very fast tempos, and then the band will be just providing tons of information to the listener. And then behind that you have all this orchestration, and there's even more information. But a lot of times the orchestration will play in the same range as the band, and then you will have like fast shredding lead guitar, and then violins doubling that at like crazy speeds. And honestly, like, I appreciate the gesture and I appreciate the tenacity to doing that. So all more power to Flash God, right? But that is stuff that is like physically impossible to pull off in the real world, and have it sound transparent. Honestly, like, a lot of these things that people orchestrate come from a place where I'd say, listen, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Obviously it's very easy these days to like have a sweeping guitar solo at 300 BPM and then have it doubled by a MIDI orchestra. You can do that. But out there in the real world, if you had like a live band on a stage with the orchestra behind it, this shit wouldn't work. And I can tell you from experience, because obviously I've been involved in projects and have been composing music my entire life that uses orchestration. In my solo albums, in stuff that I did with other bands. And I'm very fortunate to have somebody in my life, in Matthias Preisinger, who's a great friend and who has been co-producing my solo albums and orchestrating them. And he also was with me on tons of other records, like for example the Obscura album that I did. On my compositions Weltseele and Melos, he did the orchestration with me and lots of the live instruments he played. And he's the one who's always kicking my butt about these kind of things, and who's always lecturing me about how certain things just belong in a certain range, some instruments, and how overstuffing and overcooking some elements and putting them out of their natural comfort zone ends up just biting you in the ass if you're actually doing a realistical orchestral arrangements with VSTs. And he knows best, because he's been working with orchestras and orchestral arrangements for his entire life. So I always listen to him, and I did send him the Wilderun album, and even he was taken by it, and he was like, well, these guys definitely have their shit together in terms of orchestration. It is still, going to places sometimes where it's just complete madness, where just 300 tracks of audio playing at the same time, and it's just this tornado of musical information. And this is where things get difficult. But at the same time, honestly, I can't blame them, because this music is very childlike in a way, and I mean that as a compliment, because it has this wide-eyed view of the musical world, where it's just, come on, I'll take you by the hand and I'll show you something cool. Behind every little break and every little new plateau of music, there's something amazing. And there's so many ideas in this album. It's kind of like a musical fantasy world. It's like a Lord of the Ringsy, for lack of better comparisons. Not in the way that it's like it has fantasy themes, but it has that childlike fantasy quality, where it's just I want to go on an adventure, and I want to just see the scary stuff, and then there's like the beautiful stuff, and this is just playful, and it goes to all these places where it's not many bands dare to go there for lack of for fear of looking stupid or being maybe labeled as cheesy. And this album definitely sometimes can border on the cheesy side if you want to be super critical, But at the same time, it just has that wild-eyed, sense of adventure throughout. And I think that's something that we, especially in these times, we need desperately. And I think that's beautiful. And I appreciate how they keep that up from minute 1 to the last minute, right? So every single song evokes that feeling, but it's different qualities of that feeling. It takes you different places. This is why I'm saying you have to listen to it as an album from start to finish, because not one track of the album gives away everything that they have to offer. And I think that's a beautiful thing that happens not nearly often enough these days. And I totally applaud these guys for doing it. I'm a huge fan of that. Something I strive to do in my own albums as well. So I feel kind of a kinship with these guys here. Yeah, so getting back to what they do and what they don't do and what we can learn from that. So because they have almost the entire time they have metal band and orchestra going on. What happens with a lot of bands is that the two kind of clash. Metal bands like to play fast. They like to put lots of notes in it. And then if you have a very busy orchestral arrangement on top, like for example like in Winter Sun or something like that, a lot of times it either you have to solve all these arrangement problems that you're creating by mixing it in a way where the individual elements will be very narrow banded, and then you have like tiny bass or guitars because all the space is taken up otherwise, or like drums will be just trigger signal, like doom, 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 doom. You probably heard some of these productions before, and it just in this case with Wilderun, it's all very full and very lifelike, which isn't to say that the production is very old school, not at all, but it's just if the band is playing fast, intricate stuff, right, then it's not happening in a range or in a very show-off, technical, tech-deaf-y way when the orchestra is playing at the same time. And then when the orchestra is really going crazy and lots of stuff is happening, then the riffs and the band ideas will be very simple. And I think most of the time they strike a really good balance with that. Because you need to have the bigger picture in mind if you're doing music like this, which is very highly orchestrated. Because every little thing has to have a reason for existing in this arrangement. And this is something that I dislike a lot about a lot of like newer tech devs stuff, for example, which uses orchestration. And a lot of, I don't want to diss anybody here, but just saying that sometimes it feels to me like it's there to just give people the impression that you're smart. Hey, we have violins doubling the guitars. That means that we're orchestral and we listen to classical music and we're very smart musicians. And I can see where that's coming from, but a lot of times things don't end up working, especially in the live arena, if you're thinking like that. How much stuff can be put in there. Every single musical element and layer has to have a reason for existing. And Wilderun on this album, they put a lot of shit into their songs. And, sometimes you have the feeling that your speakers will burst from the, amount of information being put forward to the listener. But at the same time, if I listen very closely, I have a hard time finding elements in their music which don't have a reason for existing. So it's all very. I can always find the idea behind it, and it's just very compelling in that way. And so, yeah, that's just one of the things they don't do is just put stuff in there just to make it fuller. Even though the music is very full. And that goes for the band as well as the orchestra. So in the same way that Opeth have these very melodic, not so shreddy guitar solos. Wilderun do the same thing. Like if there's a guitar solo, it has a purpose. Then it's it's like a heroic moment, and then the guitar isn't really just showing off skills, but it is there to convey that heroic feeling and to provide melodic counterpoint to the other stuff that's happening. And that's definitely a smart move, because like listening to this album, you have the feeling that this band could play a lot more intricate stuff, but they chose to just balance out these individual elements to make their music as an entire entity intricate and interesting. And I think this is like the biggest compliment I can give them. And this is why the album works so well as a whole, even though you have 60 minutes of the oral debauchery. It just, you don't get tired so easily of this album, even though some people have complained about the, that it's too mixed too loudly or like too aggressively. I can see where this is coming from. I don't really think so, but I hear you guys. But on the other hand, even though it is, it has a loud master, and it is, louder than, a Simon and Garfunkel record for sure. It's not a record that makes you tired listening to it. They operate on these plateaus, which is something that I also like to do, and which means that their songs don't really work in like traditional verse, chorus formats, but what they do is they create plateaus of tension and intensity, emotional intensity, and then it goes from one plateau to the next, and there's like a bigger story unfolding over the top of the course of these plateaus, like a good movie or a good book. And this is why this album doesn't get tiring, even though it's 60 minutes long and there's so much stuff happening. And I think that's beautiful, and it's another reason why I think why I became an instant fan of this band and this album. And there's so much other stuff going on here that we could discuss, but I think I'll just leave it at that. And I hope that some of you guys have been, interested in learning more about this band and maybe purchasing their album. I couldn't really give you a favorite track. I think I'll just choose to have their single play in the background. Even though it will just instantly demonetize this video, but it's about sharing my appreciation for this band and this album. And I think the best way to do that, and I hope the band agrees with me, is just putting their music here and just thus directing people who like what they're hearing to their own page, so you can buy it and listen to it in full. So I'm putting the single in there, Far From Where Dreams Unfurl. But please mark my words, if you like this song, if you think it's okay, you will love the album. This is what happened to me when I first heard the single. I was like, okay, this is really good. I wanna hear where this is going, but it just didn't like floor me. It wasn't like, okay, this is gotta be my album of the year or something. But I liked it enough to pre-order the album, and when I was able to download the album and listen to it in fully, then it just really opened up, and just I had the whole experience from start to finish, and afterwards I was left happy, yearning for another run through of the album, and just being glad that I pre-ordered the album and took the time to just really sit down on headphones and take part in this journey that they're creating for the listener here. And so this is my advice to you: if you like what you're hearing or what I'm talking about here, and if this has been beneficial for you, like, listen to the entire album start to finish, take an hour out of your busy day and give it a chance. You won't regret it. So this is it. I hope you like this new format, where I'm just basically talking out of my ass about the thing that I like most in life, which is music. So if you like that sort of stuff, leave a comment below, like, subscribe, and buy the album Wilderun. Check out my other stuff, obviously. And I'll be back for more. Please leave your suggestions below, and thanks for listening. Bye bye.